I would like to now call to order the Monday, November 13th, 2023 regular meeting of the St. Charles Community Union School District 303 School Board. Ms. Marsan, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Mrs. Bell. Here. Mr. Kuschert.
Here.
Mr. Lackner.
Here.
Mr. Lentz.
Here.
Mrs. McCabe. Here. Mr. McNally.
Here.
And Mrs. Fairgrave.
Here, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn to closed session for the purpose of the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the public body, including meetings held for the purpose of discussing whether a particular parcel should be acquired?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Lentz. Thank you, Mr. Lackner. Would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. Kuschert.
Yes.
Mr. Lackner.
Yes.
Mr. Lentz.
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe.
Yes.
Mr. McNally.
Yes.
Mrs. Bell. Yes. And Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. We are now adjourning to closed session at 5:02 p.m. I would like to reconvene our Monday, November 13th, 2023 regular meeting of Community Unit School District 303 for St. Charles. The board is now back in open session. Ms. Marsan, can you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Lackner,
Here.
Mr. Lentz,
Here.
Mrs. McCabe,
Here.
Mr. McNally,
Here.
Mrs. Bell,
Here.
Mr. Kuschert.
Here.
And Mrs. Fairgrave.
Here. Now we will move to item number 4 on the agenda, which is public hearing. I would like to open the public hearing concerning the intent of the school board of the district to sell not to exceed 25 million working cash fund bonds for the purpose of increasing the district's working cash fund. Are there any comments from members of the school board? Okay, has anyone on the board received any written testimony concerning the proposed issuance of the working cash fund bonds? Please speak now. Okay, would any community members like to make a comment concerning the proposed issuance of working cash fund bonds?
Good evening, board. I just wanted to make everyone aware that we have a Spanish interpreter with us this evening, and Rosie will share a few comments with regard to our public hearing.
Si algún miembro de la comunidad desea hacer algún comentario sobre la emisión propuesta de bonos de fondo de operaciones, puedo interpretar sus comentarios a la Junta Ejecutiva.
Can I have a motion to adjourn the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lackner. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Moving to item 5 on the agenda, which is citizen comments. I do believe we have citizen comments at this time. And while we're waiting for that, as you saw just a few minutes ago, I would like to reiterate to the community that we do have an interpreter here today. So this individual, she can assist any families that require services. Okay, and Mr. Blackner, would you please read the preamble?
During the public comment period, members of the public body who wish to speak are asked to first state their name and the community in which they reside. Each individual will have up to 3 minutes to address the board on a topic of their choosing. We ask all individuals who address the board to do so with respect and civility toward others. Please note that that personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. We also want to inform our speakers that all regular, special, and committee meetings are live streamed and available for viewing at any time on the district's YouTube channel. Personal information should be considered before making a statement that will be recorded and made public. While the board will not respond to today's public comment during this meeting, we are committed to listening to you to help support our work for the district and on behalf of our students, staff, families, and community members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lackner. I would like to ask, and I will please ask for your grace as I pronounce some of the last names, so my apologies if I'm incorrect. Mr. Anthony Macion. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Board, administration, all the other attendees, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've also had a chance to speak with 2 of the board members one-on-one. I told both of them that in regards to the Davis Richmond decision, that option A is clearly the best option, and asked why we were discussing one option that is at the taxpayer's expense and another that was deemed unviable. Here are some of the things that I heard. I heard K-5 is the biggest hurdle. Many board members want K-5. The administration made it clear that K-5 should be top criteria. Then why didn't you all make it one of the top criteria for the decision? Where's the data or detail to support this? I can't find anything showing that it's the largest recommendation. And based on the recommendation and some words from Dr. Gordon as well, it was taken into account, but deemed that it was not worth pulling Davis Richmond apart. I heard option B addresses the fact that Richmond will need to grow in the future and plans for a permanent 6th classroom addition prior to the 2027-28 school year. That seems like the type of thing that redistricting is supposed to address. Maybe we shouldn't spend 3.5 million on used mobiles and earmark another 9 million for construction before we even know what the district looks like next August. Option B is not fiscally responsible and mobiles aren't safe and secure. That's something else that I heard. I agree with that one. It is irresponsible. And in regards to mobiles, and I quote from the scenarios document, they are a safety and security impact when classrooms are placed in mobiles. I agree. Number 4, I heard anecdotes about how a family member went to a performance at one of the schools and asked why all the names in one of the classes were Hispanic. Do they segregate at this school? The person asked. We never got to what the response was, but wouldn't it have been a wonderful opportunity to talk about how dual language one way allows Spanish-speaking children to learn English while also maintaining the integrity of their culture? And that as a board member, this person would do everything in their power to make sure that is protected and nurtured until dual language 2 could be implemented. With option F, and I'm quoting the recommendation, dual language teachers would not have a collaborative teaching partner, resulting in students being with the same 15 to 20 students across their entire elementary career. Teacher collaboration is a strategic goal, and those students would be isolated for 6 years. That is not an equitable experience. I heard about dual language a lot. There is no full end-to-end plan for two-way dual language. Yes, it's a gold standard. Yes, Naperville does it. If you go on their website, you can read all about it in English and Spanish. Maybe we should start with something like that. There is no plan to address the academic issues that Richmond had prior to the merger. Do we think that those will not become an issue again? Finally, you all may think that you've got everything you need to make this decision. In the last meeting, Board President Mrs. Fairgrieve stated she wasn't comfortable with waiting to make a decision. She stated if we can find a way to seize this opportunity and get comfortable with some of the risk, we have the opportunity to make fundamental changes and perhaps resolve concerns in the district. Well, since you all don't have actual resolutions identified, this is making a decision that will disrupt students, teachers, and the community for no other reason than to put your stamp on a decision. Not making a decision is also a decision. And in this case, it's the right one for the students, the teachers, the families, the taxpayers, and the community as a whole. Take option. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I would like to ask Ms. Lisa Accioni to come forward.
Hi, Lisa Macchione, St. Charles. I want to start by reading from the King County Chronicle dated March 15th, 2001, entitled Parents Ask School Board to Reject Davis Richmond Plan. It includes a quote from, at the time, Parent Ed McNally, who is now the board vice president. It states, "Nothing that harms a community as this has done is a good thing." At the time, many parents, particularly in the Davis school area, were adamantly against merging the two schools. The schools were performing at different levels. The makeup of the populations was different, and that presented in the property values. But that merger went through. Many parents in the area were very happy with the education their children received at the combined Davis Richmond, and their kids would say the same. My current 6th grader would be one of them. I also have a child at Davis in 2nd grade who is looking forward to going to Richmond next year. That's where the big kids go. She's supposed to move with the whole student population she's come to know over the past 3 years. That is, unless the board ignores the administration's recommendation to vote for option A. Somehow, everyone is stuck on this notion of K through 5, despite it not being a criterion for this decision. We've watched every meeting since this potential Davis-Richmond split was proposed, and the information that came back was that a transition has a small but measurable impact on children's learning, but that impact is eliminated within a year. No other reason has been given as to why the board is so determined to see these two schools return to K-5, except for the inaccurate use of the word inequitable, which they mistakenly take to mean that since it's not all the same, it's inequitable. However, that's not what inequitable means. Things do not always have to be the same to be fair. And speaking of what's fair, you keep emphasizing this dual language program when there's not always a Spanish translator at these meetings, no Spanish version of the documents, and the board does not reflect the diverse makeup of the Davis-Richmond population. Option F was a rejected situation based on the district's very own strategic priorities. It would not provide for effective collaboration. That's based on this idea of a two-way dual language program that exists solely as a lofty someday goal. No actual plans to develop a two-way dual language program have been established. Option B puts us right back where we were 12 years ago with no preparations in place to make anything better. Plus, the mobiles aren't safe. As Dr. Gordon relayed, Davis Richmond, the way it is, isn't perfect, but it's working. Make the right choice to keep Davis Richmond together. We, the families, the teachers, the staff are telling you now that anything but A will, to use Mr. McNally's words, harm our community. And that isn't a good thing because 2 full schools worth of families don't want to have to tell their kids that they won't be seeing some of their friends in school next year. Option A would uphold the administration's intent towards minimal disruption for students and families. Making a decision without all the factors flushed out is a misguided decision. Keep us as one, put the right structures in place, and then reassess. Vote A because as elected officials, you are voting on our behalf, and we want A. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. May I ask Mr. Mike Backer forward?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Backer and I live in St. Charles. And although I've lived here for close to 20 years in our same address, my boys age 7 and 9 who are here tonight have changed schools 7 times. For perspective, my older kids in 24 years of combined elementary school changed schools 0 times. My youngest 2 boys, Rogan and Rory, are in the Anderson Access program and both have IEPs. And they both are impacted by your decision-making tonight. One question I have, how many of your children have had to move during those formative elementary years? All research says that high mobility, especially at a young age, is challenging for student learning. Challenging academically, challenging in completing your task and having resiliency, and challenging to have a sense of belonging. Aren't those the 3 tenets that your pathways to excellence stand for? These happen to be the reasons that we're here tonight, to remind you that this program is in place and there's an impact on that program as well. And how about the wonderful staff who work with those children every day? How about exactly? How about the principal who I've met with numerous times? The team of special educators, related services, specialty teachers, all of them trying to establish a sense of belonging as well and a relationship to support all of our children. How are they able to build relationships in professional learning communities where the number one tenet there is building those relationships so they can work together, not be separated? How does their high mobility rate help you to recruit and retain quality teachers in special education? You do know there's a shortage, don't you? Our district hires paid consultants to assess specific programming needed for children and moving children constantly, especially those who have special needs, cannot be a frequent recommendation of those organizations. Can't be. Allow our children some stability. Allow their teachers to work together and build those relationships needed in professional learning communities. My wife and I are aware of the challenges that you face. This is a tough position to be in, and you're facing multifaceted aspects of this program. All we're asking tonight, my wife, is for you to be keenly aware also of, and considerate and deliberate of the impact that you have on all of our kids. Our children, along with your children, your grandchildren, and your neighbors' children, every one of them, they're a part of those 5,000 elementary kids that you're talking about in our community. I've got 2 of them here tonight. And I can tell you this, every one of them want to be on the pathway to excellence and to have a sense of belonging. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. May I ask Ms. Colleen Backer to come forward?
Hi, my name is Colleen Backer and I also live in St. Charles. I'm a parent and a current educator at St. Charles North High School. But tonight I'm speaking as a parent and a community member who's concerned about our district's stability. Our district is going through a tremendous amount of needed change in order to have financial stability, and your job is hard. Numbers and research are essential when making decisions. However, the quality of the data and research being used is imperative. And when we're talking about programming, we're talking about people. We're talking about humans. The priorities of our strategic plan include effective collaboration, instructional coherence, and a culture of dignity. Programs cannot run without collaboration. Our district has put both time and money into professional learning communities. Coherence is being logical and providing consistency. We have identified that we need to close schools, change boundaries, and change school schedules again to have more financial stability and to prepare for the future. Knowing this, we need to give our teachers and students the ability to work together and respond to change. This will provide informed data about what's working with our strategic plan and how it relates to student achievement. And the last component is a culture of dignity. This is about humans being worthy of honor and respect, because if we want a culture of dignity, we have to think about people. We have to understand that each number is a person with a face. And as I watched the board meeting last week, there was a huge focus on the percentage of students that are not accessing the dual language program, even though they meet the criteria. The program may not fit for them for many different reasons, and those reasons cannot be communicated with numbers alone. Speaking of meeting criteria, we have many students within our school district who have been diagnosed with autism. A percentage of those students are receiving services in the Access program to appropriately support their significant developmental and communication delays. Change has an adverse effect on their learning. We've had 3 different executive directors of student services in the last 3 years. Our current leadership is focused on inclusion. How can students with special needs create relationships with constant changes? When scenario F was reintroduced at the board meeting last week, Dr. Igo shared this scenario would move the Access program again. It just moved to Anderson this year. Being an autism mommy, we use the phrase mismatch a lot. Brogan's face might be blank, even though he's excited, but it doesn't match because he's really overstimulated. My son Rory might have the biggest, sweetest smile on his face and seem happy, but it doesn't match his body because he's not regulated. Our district's strategic plan and scenario F are a mismatch. If we're creating a culture of dignity, our students cannot be an afterthought. I'm here advocating for students and hope that my son's names and faces help you to understand that every number represents a student. Every student has a story, and we can't make all decisions solely based on numbers, especially with the amount of shifting that already needs to happen. All these changes do not align with the strategic plan. They do not match. We need to provide stability for our little humans. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. May I ask our final speaker, Sam Ledoux, to come forward, please?
What's up, guys? I apologize for my raspy voice and my nagging cough. Sam Ledoux, 5 kids in our schools or coming through our schools. I live in South Belgium. I'm here tonight to do 2 things. The first is to thank you guys. I thank you for adding a document to your transportation department webpage, which now makes transportation accessible for all kids, including kids that have divorced families and live in separate homes that qualify. Thank you for doing the right thing. Kudos to you. The second thing that I've come here tonight to do is not to ask for anything, not to request anything, not to demand anything, but to beg, because I'm not too proud. I'm here to beg that you, Board of Education, I'm here to beg you, Superintendent Gordon, I'm here to beg all D303 administrators and all D303 staff to, from this point forward, assume full responsibility for the advocacy of all kids at all times, in all spaces, in all situations, from all adults, so that parents like me don't have to spend 3.5 years doing that. It would be awesome if D303 was a place that our current families and families with kids coming up and families that will be moving into our community, if they could assume and accurately assume that they are already welcomed, they are already accounted for, they are already included, because they've been advocated for proactively by you. I look forward to D303 becoming this place. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our citizen comments at this time. Moving to section 6 on the agenda, the reports to the board. We will start with our superintendent's report from Dr. Gordon.
Thank you, Mrs. Fairgrave. Tonight, I want to give a couple of updates. First on the strategic plan. I just want to thank our incredible staff who've been working tirelessly to implement the District 303 strategic plan. Under the strategic priority of effective collaboration, which is defined as people work interdependently to positively affect student learning and take collective responsibility for the outcomes of District 303 students, staff, families, and our community. Under that priority, our educators in D303 at every level are working diligently and collaboratively to implement our professional learning communities. In our latest teacher contract, the Administration Teachers Association carved out time for our teachers to collaborate to do this work. Our educators are meeting collaboratively during the week to examine evidence of student learning, discuss instructional strategies, and make adjustments to meet the needs of our students. Our educators began this journey only in late September, and I could not be more proud of the work that they've been doing and the progress we're making. I meet on a regular basis with our principals. And one of the first questions I ask our school leaders, where are we at in our professional learning communities? How is that going within our schools? And each and every leader is so proud of their staff and the work that's going on. And I don't want to oversimplify this because this has been hard work. This has been challenging work. But D303 teachers continue to step up to the plate, continue to partner, continue to do the hard work of our strategic plan. Under that same strategic priority, under effective collaboration, I'm so impressed with the level of collaboration that is occurring through the learning and teaching department, specifically Dr. Christine Igo and Miss Tina King. They're working with each of our department chairs, which is new. That's a new addition through our teachers contract, which I'm really proud of. But they are working with the department chairs to help each of the different departments engage in meaningful PLC work. This type of collaboration has not been the norm in D303. And what I mean is district office and department chairs and leaders at the building. And I'm excited when I hear the different feedback that I receive about the interactions that are taking place. I believe from both perspectives, the department chairs and the district office personnel who are meeting with them, this level of collaboration is highly appreciated and valued and making a difference in the work we're doing. In the area of, also under the area of collaboration, Justin Attaway, our Chief Operations Officer, participated in a podcast that was a real behind the scenes look at public education financing. I know that doesn't excite a whole lot of people, but it's such an important piece for our community have a deeper understanding of public education financing because it's unlike anything else. But what I also appreciate was the look at the levy and other financial information that he was able to share. I also appreciate our Chief Communication Officer, Scott Harvey, and the work that he's doing to really make sure that we're communicating in multiple ways in our district, that we're no longer just going to be sending out an electronic written version, that we're looking at podcasts, that we're looking at videos, that we're trying to send our message in different ways because we recognize people hear things in a multitude of ways, and our staff and our community are inundated with tons of messages. So we need to try to help bridge that gap for all of our stakeholders. Again, just all over the strategic plan, I am really pleased in the work that we're doing and the work that's happening. And it's occurring across all different departments. But tonight I wanted to just give you a quick highlight on that. As you know, the Illinois School Report Card is out, and I would encourage anybody who wants to look more at it to go to the IllinoisReportCard.com to see more. But the District 303 all of our schools were either exemplary or commendable The two highest results schools can earn based on their accountability data. 4 of our schools earned exemplary designation, which represents overall performance in the top 10% of all Illinois schools, with no groups of students who are falling behind. Schools with commendable designations have no underperforming students and a graduation rate greater than 67%, with overall performance outside of the top 10% of the statewide schools. Overall, District 303 saw gains in academic proficiency over the prior year and exceeded the state average by significant margins in English language arts and math. In ELA as a whole, we had a 6% increase. In math overall, we had a 2.9% increase. In the Illinois Science Assessment, over 73% of our students achieved proficient or exemplary levels this year, with the number of exemplary students increasing by nearly 4% over last year. This goes to the hard work of educators each and every day. Our support staff being there for our educators, our community. This is not just a one thing. This is everybody working together, and exceptionally proud. At the next learning teaching meeting, which I believe is November 27th, Dr. Christine Igo and others will be reporting out on our SAR, our Student Achievement Report. I would highly encourage everybody to watch that and hear the latest information. The other piece is we have a data dashboard that's always uploaded once a month for our community, and it's a really quick way of checking in our district. Where are we at? What are we doing? I'm just going to highlight a couple of pieces. Academics, 45.3% of our 8th grade students are taking Algebra 1 or higher. That's an area that we want to continue to increase, and really pleased with that. In the belonging, our behavior data percent of students who have 2 or less referrals continues to be above 90% for all 3, elementary, middle, and high school. That's a good piece there. And our operation revenues are exceeding our expenditures at this time. But again, we post it once a month. Quick little snapshot of D303. Boundary timelines, because I say this every time I have the microphone. The boundaries will impact each and every school to varying degrees. On November 28th at North High School and November 29th at East High School, RSP, our boundary consultant, will be presenting scenarios for the community to give feedback on. They'll also be presenting a survey that will go out on November 28th as well. The board will take final action on those boundaries at its February 12th meeting. Finally, this week, actually Wednesday, is School Board Appreciation Day. I want people to know that these 7 individuals care very much about District 303, our staff, our students, and our community. Tonight is a great example of what a board must do. Make tough decisions. It can be very easy for people to believe that the board just shows up on a few Mondays a month and makes decisions. That's not true about this board. Why I know that? Because I work with these people. Our board puts in a significant amount of time reviewing documents, asking questions, and seeking understanding of situations. The work before the board can make some for challenging conversations and won't always lead to a unanimous decision, but it's thoroughly vetted in order to achieve the best outcomes. For most of the board, they volunteer their time here while also working full-time. I don't want that to go unnoticed. I am grateful for the D303 board for the time, thinking, and effort each of you put forward to making D303 a great place for our students, staff, and community. Their goal is for District 303 to be a great school district. When I first interviewed, that was their exact statement to me. Paul, we want to go from good to great. We have to do this. I recognize it's Board Appreciation Week and that I work solely for the board, but I am here to say I am really proud of our board and the hard work. As I said earlier, they're not going to make every decision that's going to make everyone happy. I recognize that, but I want the community to know that these people put in an incredible amount of time and effort to come to the best decision they possibly can. So I just thank you for your time, your effort, and your services to our community. That's it. Back to you, Mrs. Fairgrave.
Thank you for that update, Dr. Gordon, and on behalf of the board, thank you very much for those kind words. and support.
Absolutely.
It is appreciated. Moving to item B, so we have our committee reports. I would like to start with learning and teaching, if we can.
We can, thank you. We had our learning and teaching meeting, I'm sorry. I have the date. Was October 16th. We had three basic agenda items. Dr. Cindy Roosh provided a presentation on our multilingual learning programs. She went through the requirements and the details regarding the enrollments and what we do here at D303. She explained that how students are identified and what we do in order for students to be successful in learning a second language. She also explained to us about access testing and that a student who is considered an English learner is to reach a 4.8 on the access test. She also went through the various programs and we had a good discussion. It was just for discussion. There was no action in that. Dr. Roosh stayed with us for the next portion of our agenda, which was about the Spanish arts for middle school. She described what the curriculum we need for the 6th through 8th in order to meet the Spanish arts program and explained what was included in the course, and that will be on our for action tonight. Our last portion of the meeting was for discussion as well. It was on the high school course catalog and the recommendations. Dr. Christensen and Yvette Stahl, Tina King, and Dr. Igo all went through with us how they reviewed the course catalog. They explained their process and determined which courses would be added or removed. And you can find those courses in our minutes as well as in the recording the video recording that we have. And there was no action for that. We adjourned at 7:42 after good discussion. And as Dr. Gordon said, we will be meeting November 27th to do our student achievement report. Mr. Kushner, did I miss anything? Okay.
Thank you very much for that, Mrs. McCabe. I do not think there is an update from the policy committee, but I would like to confirm we're good. Okay, so then that would leave business services committee update.
Business services. So we had our normal report back for Mid Valley and D303. No items of note in those. We also walked through, I think for the first time since I've been following the board, certainly the last several years, the first 5-year budget projections for the district, which was very exciting. Thank you again, Paul, Justin, and the team for working those up. Following that, we walked through the tax levy workshop. We got a little bit of an education on how the levy process works, how it's distributed across the district, how revenue is allocated, how there are new businesses and other, new entities that come into the district that are also part of our revenue side. Following that, we went through some bond compliance or bond issuance compliance stuff we had to do. And then we got a construction update from the team. I'm going to give some more detail. Give me 1 second. We had some things move forward in our plans. So there were a number of access control and safety items that were moved forward that we're expecting some bids in December for. There was additional progress on the playgrounds, including the purchasing of some inclusive equipment that we were walking through. We also met one of the Wold engineers as well. 1 second, let me scroll back. We had a very busy meeting, if you can't tell. There was also a maintenance project grant that we discussed. a renewal of the St. Charles Salt Dome lease and some updates on the district-wide air conditioning improvements. There were some things that were moved around in that, just really due to the availability of equipment. So those will be addressed. The Lincoln elevator, we were also given an update on that. There are some delays, and so you will see an item in the consent agenda for the Lincoln elevator. We talked with the team that even though the elevator is not going to be fully done, I think the timeline they were saying is like 35 weeks. That does put us in jeopardy of next year. We believe we can obtain occupancy for Lincoln in the interim while we're waiting for that final installation to occur. There was also some feedback on the Lincoln rooftop unit, and then a renewal of the Silver Glen Farm lease. There's also for consent agenda, so Silver Glen Farm lease, as well as the Infinite Visions software for renewal as well. That's all we got.
Yeah, we had a second Business Services Committee meeting on the 6th of November. And in that meeting, the sole agenda item was the review of the grade level center issue that's on the agenda for action tonight. In that discussion, admin shared its perspective and around alternative scenarios, two of which reached some consensus for consideration here at the board table, as well as the inclusion of a third scenario for the board's consideration and action today.
Right. Thank you, both Mr. Lentz, Mr. Lackner, very much for that. Next, we will move to item 7 on the agenda, which is for discussion. The item at hand is grade level configuration. And
Thank you,
believe-
Mrs. Fairgrave. We got our team moving up here. We'll have a presentation around the information, a quick review of that information, also answering some of the questions that were left from the previous November 6th conversation. So we will get that presentation loaded up and we will begin. Studying some.
Good evening. This evening, we're going to re-engage in that conversation we started last week. So our outcome really today is to make sure that we give or are able to answer the questions that you provided as it relates to the grade level configuration so that you are able to take action on a scenario later this evening. Again, as we begin our work, we always want to ground ourselves in our core values, and particularly this time it's around perseverance as we continue to overcome challenges, as well as looking for ways to find sustainable solutions over time. These are our strategic commitments. And these are the strategic commitments that we use to guide our work, as well as to help us to outline for us how we're going to come about improving student achievement over time. The information that we're talking about tonight really does across all 3 of our strategic priorities. And then just as a reminder, this work really fits into the greater pieces of the master facility plan. So we had early on decided, or the board had decided, that it was important that we address overcrowding at the elementary. And we had kind of put that into the urgent stage. And so we started that kind of one was about making sure that we had enough space, opening Fox Ridge, moving around some programs to ensure that we had that. In that process, we set some minimum space standards to help guide the work that we do. We're really in that second one now, kind of that 1B, where we put those things in place. And now we're really talking about and preparing for boundaries. And within those boundaries, the conversation tonight is around grade level configuration. So for RSP to be able to draw those boundaries, they need to understand how we would like to use our buildings. This is just a reminder of the evaluation criteria that we use. We have primary and secondary criteria. Purpose of the criteria was really to allow us to look through each scenario through different and multiple lenses. As we mentioned before, there is not a perfect solution. And that as a district, we will need to weigh the impact of each scenario and the considerations of each of the choices that we make, and then determine what is best for District 303 overall. Throughout this process, the administration has considered numerous scenarios to help address our overcrowding issue. When considering the scenarios, administration used the criteria from the previous slide. And then based on feedback from last night's meeting, we are going to discuss 3 scenarios this evening. The board had the most interest in learning more about scenarios B and F, and then scenario A was also asked to be considered. Again, as we met last night, we had some questions come up, and we've kind of taken those questions and put them into 2 chunks. One is the dual, we had some questions as they related to a dual language, and then we had some questions that related to finance and funding. One of the questions we had was really how many multilingual students do we have that speak Spanish? And this chart really does represent the number of students across the district with which they their home or their heritage language is Spanish, and that is 64%. And then kind of across that chart, it takes that 64% of students and breaks it up over a level. So we can see that 4% of the 64 are part of early childhood. As you look at those numbers, you can see that the highest number of our students really is at the elementary level. And that's to be expected, as we know that as students come in and how English proficiency is gained over time, that it takes between 5 and 7 years for proficiency to become, for students to gain proficiency. So as they do that, they are released from services. So we would expect that our middle school and high school numbers would be less. Then the question really became about, well, of those students, what percentage are eligible to enroll in dual language? And this really kind of breaks down the number of students that are eligible. And so that our eligible program is really for anybody who has or requires a full-time program, or who scores below a 3.5 on the access test. And this really does encompass all of our students in that program, but it gives opportunities for where you can see how those students break out. So we have students enrolled in the dual language program. We have students enrolled in what we call part-time TBE programming. And you can see that in some places, such as Richmond, Davis, and Wild Rose, the majority of students enroll in the dual language program. At Anderson, it really does kind of split fairly across the board. And then at Munhall, more students are likely to remain in that part-time program. The next question that really came up was why don't our eligible families enroll in dual language? And so that's not information that we are currently tracking. We are definitely putting some systems and structures in place to make sure we will have that moving forward. But what we did do is we kind of took a sample school, went through different files and interviewed teachers. And as we did that, we really came up with kind of 4 big ideas as to why our families may choose not to enroll. One is that English, many of the students or most of the students who did not enroll in the program, English is the predominantly spoken language in the home. So they did not necessarily have the foundational Spanish skills to be successful in the program. So what that means is likely on the home survey is that there's a question about, does anybody in the home speak another language? So traditionally, we would anticipate that there's maybe somebody living in the home that speaks Spanish, which is why that question is yes. But yet the family as a whole generally speaks in English. And so those Spanish skills are not necessarily, students wouldn't be prepared to walk into a classroom and speak Spanish. Another reason really have to do with special education needs. And really that kind of falls across any special education need. But in particular, we saw it with students who had who are eligible for some of our more specialized programming like Access or RISE. I happen to know that there are students in RISE as well. One that we did see that kind of connects to some of the work that we were talking about is that families do not want children across multiple elementary schools. And that becomes an issue when students in a family, I might have siblings, some students are eligible for dual language and others are not, which would mean students would be impacted by that. So the parents don't want to split their students across multiple elementary buildings. And then there was also some were moved into the district from another district that didn't offer dual language. And so that, again, those foundational Spanish skills really weren't in place for students.
Dual language programs, one-way or two-way, have been proven to be the most effective in closing achievement gaps for our students. Two-way dual language programs, where 50% of the students speak English as their first language, have shown to be the most effective. In order to have the success identified in the research, we need to have the key elements of a dual language program from this slide in place. As we have discussed before, it is about ensuring systems and structures are in place to support a guaranteed and viable curriculum and parent and community involvement. Also, students should be immersed in each language at the appropriate allocations to build biliteracy. And there needs to be a plan for ongoing assessment and progress monitoring in both languages. We have talked about transitioning to two-way dual language program. It is important to know that we will continue to support the students in our one-way program. While we make the transition to the two-way program, we will continue to support the building of a guaranteed and viable curriculum, professional learning to help build and bridge instruction, and support for our PLC process, and responding to student evidence of student learning in both ELA and Spanish. Similar to how we developed the strategic plan, moving to a two-way program requires that we collaboratively develop a comprehensive plan, starting with understanding our current reality, establishing a committee to do the research and establish the vision, mission, and overarching goals of the program. And finally, establishing a curriculum assessment and instruction committee to ensure that we have the right instructional resources and professional learning necessary for success of the program. There are also some questions related to finances that we will address on the next few slides.
So if we were to move forward with scenario B, one of the big questions is how are we going to fund this? So the estimated cost of a 6th classroom addition to Richmond is $8.25 million. So that's in 2024. So any year that we construct after 2024, it's roughly 4% escalation each year after that. So we're currently planning to issue 22.75 million in long-term debt in July of 24. That could go all the way up to 25 million if interest rates improve between now and the time of issuance. So our plan to fund scenario B would be to reprioritize the 5-year capital improvement plan to make sure that we allocate appropriate funds from the long-term debt to construct the permanent addition to Richmond.
To provide additional clarity, when we talked about duplication of services, we were referring to the front office staff in our buildings. It is ideal to have bilingual staff in these positions, but these can be hard positions to fill. In addition, when hiring for specific specialist roles, reading specialists, math specialists, specialty area teachers, building administrators, and hiring teams, supported by human resources, should establish hiring criteria that filters all candidates through the lens of proper certifications and endorsements that are necessary to meet the needs of all of their learners.
One of the other questions that we received is what would be the potential resale value of a refurbished mobile or a new mobile for that matter. And that's a really tough question to answer. No mobile vendor that we talk to is willing to lock into a certain range just because there's so many factors that influence resale value, age, condition, demand for mobile classrooms at that time, geographic location, not only our geographic location, but the location that the mobile would be going to. But probably the best comparable that we have is actually in Barrington 220. They recently just sold a 6 classroom mobile in March 2022. And their final sale price was for $85,000.
As we discussed, the planning needed for dual language, there is a grant that we'll be applying for to help offset the planning costs and some costs needed during the implementation, such as professional learning and resources for staff. There are other financial considerations that need to be addressed for the scenario, which Mr. Attaway just covered.
So then where does that leave us in terms of next steps? Really, what we're asking for this evening is for you to take action on one of the three scenarios that we discussed. That we have discussed, scenario A, scenario B, or scenario F. And then just to put that into perspective or into timeline, that the moving to action tonight then allows RSP to begin their work or to kind of finalize their work. They certainly have been working towards putting some boundaries in place so that we can have that community informational session on the 28th and 29th of November, where the purpose of that meeting is to gain community input. Then the survey will go out. So again, the purpose to gain community input. And then finally, the board is to take action on boundaries on February 12th, 2024.
Mrs. Beardgrave, back to you.
Okay, so with that, I would open it up to the board for any questions or questions to the team here or comments. Maybe we don't have any.
Is this the portion that you want? I'm curious as to how you want discussion to go. Do you, are we?
I would say, I mean, it should really go as we historically have done. So we have three options or scenarios for consideration in the presentation that was just given. Although we will vote on them separately, we have one opportunity for discussion, which is right now. So the floor is anyone on the board or that would like to speak?
I'll speak.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Krisher.
Okay, so I think we've established that we are in a tough situation with some options that take great consideration. And I want to echo something that Paul said earlier about the board and the administration have been working hand in hand for months and months and months on this. This has not been a fly-by-night initiative. It has been with great detail and attention that we have tried to arrive at viable scenarios to consider, and it's been extremely difficult. The assertion that anyone on this board wouldn't care about the children or whom we are affecting is categorically false. In fact, it makes me want to burst into tears thinking about that. We take it extremely seriously, and that is why each and every one of us has put ourselves at this board table and put our names on the line to try and make good decisions for the thousands of students that we serve. And it is not easy at all. It's extremely humbling. I wanted to take a moment to explain to the public what we have arrived at as far as the variables of consideration over the last several months. It's been many, many meetings, so it may be difficult at times for folks to go back to the very specific meeting, presentation, discussion, and compilate what we have to consider here. The community does not all share the same thoughts on this either, which makes it exceedingly more difficult to make a good decision because one person may present one idea and another presents a completely conflicting idea, and they're both valid and they're both very difficult to determine which is the better course of action, because no matter what we do, we will be impacting human beings and little kids. So I want to revisit a couple of the things that both the administration as well as the consultants that we have solicited their expert opinion on, and some of the things that they have told us to consider when making this decision. So the first thing, as everybody is well aware, overcrowding was the challenge that we were supposed to be directly solving. And the problem as you go to do that becomes extremely convoluted because other areas of need and challenge arise when you just simply try to allocate space. It's not that easy. Administration and consultants indicated that K through 5 was paramount for student learning, teacher collaboration, uniformity of instruction and assessment, and school performance across the district. We had the mobile discussion and the safety concerns of threat, weather, mold, and that the value diminishes over time. So yet another variable that we need to consider in this. Single building standard was ideal, and thus changes may need to be made to existing relationships that have been around for a long time. We were told that dual language is necessary, and admittedly, we weren't doing it exactly the way that it needed to be done to be the most efficient way that it can be. And so space would need to be allocated, and it would take time to be able to make that work efficiently. We were told that transitions, multiple transitions through grade levels can be detriment to student learning outcomes. Yet another consideration that needed to be made. We talked about neighborhood schools and the necessity for students to go to the neighborhood school, the school most closely aligned with where they live. And that needed to be done to the best of our ability as well. We also said that we needed to establish agreed upon primary and secondary criteria that we could give to RSP, our consultants, so that they would be able to draw the boundaries to what mattered most. And unfortunately, as has been stated by many of our folks here, there is no perfect example or perfect outcome. And then changes were made to existing buildings, closing of Lincoln, Compass here, staying here, which also impacted space allocation. To my knowledge, no singular board member brought these forward. It was a collective effort between administration, board, and RSP. And so here we are, trying to make what we believe is the best, I suppose, compromise, for lack of a better word, in order to do the least amount of disruption to this district, while also adhering to those 9 variables. This is why when folks maybe look at what some board members think and other board members think, is that we're all trying to arrive at a sound answer while also taking into consideration how we weigh each of these variables. And so I suppose the reason why I wanted to speak here was because we have a couple of options that we're going to be thinking about right now. And the reason why certain board members are going one way or another isn't for some personal agenda. At least I know I can speak for myself, and I feel I can speak for the board, even though it's not appropriate for a single board member to speak for everybody else. But I don't think that anyone sitting at this table has a personal agenda to serve themselves or their own children or anything like that. I want to serve the 12,000 students, 5,000 students that we're talking about right here to the best of my ability. And I will continue to do that. And I will continue to bear the brunt of feedback or backlash if necessary, because it's the burden that we bear as elected officials, and to do our darndest. We also welcome the feedback, and we appreciate the enthusiasm from parents and families and staff who know that this is a tough decision. And I think almost every bit of communication that came through acknowledged exactly that. I don't envy your position. We know this is tough. And so we're going to present some scenarios here. We're going to go over these scenarios, and we're going to vote accordingly. I think the biggest thing that I wanted to get out there was that none of us take this lightly, and we hope to do our very best for everyone.
Well said. Thank you. This has been, I think, every person I know, this is the toughest decision I think I've had on the board. And I went through COVID. So this is really has been a difficult decision. And as I said at the last meeting, I would go from one option to the other, back and forth, as I thought through all the pieces. And I appreciate what Mr. Kuchar said, because we can disagree on what the what we vote on, but I do believe we all have come to this with good intent and without agendas. And that I appreciate hearing from another board member, because we're not going to all agree. And yet I do believe we will move forward to do what's best for kids. I would like to just outline my thinking in terms of the options. So that as a board, because I have not spoken to every board member, where I'm coming from. So there are two options that I can vote for. I've spoken to a number of parents throughout the last week. And I think I made it clear to anyone I talked to that the real big hurdle was the K-5. And that in order for an option to pass, you have to have a majority. That's what we are about in democracy. So when I look at option A, which I can vote for option A is the things that I feel are important to what the future would be. So there would be, if we keep it as is, there's little disruption for families and kids. We'll keep the program as it is. It clearly has community support. And to speak to that, having been an administrator when we put this all together, that was a very difficult time. And it makes me proud to be part of a community that even in a time that was really difficult and hard, that people came together. And now it is their community, and it's very, they feel very passionate about it. That to me speaks highly for who we are as a D303 community. And I've seen it in other schools when we had to move kids around, and I believe it will happen no matter what happens with the boundaries, that kids should feel welcome. And I think our administration and our teachers and staff do an outstanding job. And then our parents follow through by realizing that they can make a place that might be hard to accept a good place for kids. So I thank the community, and I am very, very pleased to see what has come out in the last 12 years. I really strongly believe about the multiple partnerships for PLCs. I think that what we have in option A is bigger than just having 2 sections of monolingual and 2 sections of dual language. So to me, the program we have right now, the delivery model, speaks highly to that partnership. Also, there's very little cost that would be changed. No mobiles. Those are pieces that as a board member, I take very seriously as well. So I see that A is an option that I can support. I can also support B, because then I think of myself as having been an educator for over 40 years, that K-5 articulation, the idea that everybody's in the same building for resources, how many conversations you would have on your way to to pick up your mail or to deliver something, or the reading teacher, the reading specialist walks by and goes, "Oh, Becky, I've got to tell you this." Those things happen all the time, and it's a critical piece when everybody is in the same building, and I totally get that. I like the idea that all the resources are there, that people have that opportunity to share and see each other's classrooms, those kinds of pieces. It's not going to be the K-5 won't be as broad as we have with it. When Davis Richmond is 1 school, 2 buildings, it doesn't work that way, but there is a real benefit to having it be K-5. It's also been my experience from when I started as an administrator here that Richmond needs space. It just needs more classrooms. And if this is a way for us to get that, I think it's going to be in the long run a positive thing for the future. So those are the pieces. I can vote for A and B. I will not vote for F, but the reason is twofold, and I think we heard some of that tonight. One is that singular dual language. We did that in the past. We had K-5 at Anderson and K-5 at Richmond. And eventually that had to all come back together, weren't enough kids. We were busing kids from Richmond to Anderson. The disconnect of the two strands PLC work, it eventually it didn't work. And so I've had that experience, so that doesn't appeal to me. I also take very seriously, and I have for a long time, how often we move our special needs children, and that would have to happen at Anderson, and that's a hard one for me to agree to. I do want to say that I really appreciate the feedback that we got from parents and families. It was very respectful and very honest and direct. I know that it takes a lot of time for us all to, I have more flexibility in my schedule to talk to folks, but I really do believe this is a board that's out to find solutions. We may not always agree, but again, as I said before, I think we all come here with great intentions for kids. And so that's where I stand.
I think we're going in order here, so I guess I'm up next. I am very aware of the difficulty of a split or a dramatic change in the way your children are going to be educated. That's what happened to me 12 years ago. In the split itself, or actually not the split, but the joining of the two schools was not itself the impetus for my running for the board. The impetus for my running for the board was the manner in which the decision was made, because it seemed like it was made in a hasty manner without a lot of planning to move to something that was not a proven educational outcome. So I've spent over the last, just over the last weekend, I probably spent 15 hours talking with you. If I had to pay for minutes on my phone, I'd go broke. I've spent a lot of time just over the last weekend, but over the last several weeks, having a lot of conversations with folks, particularly folks in Davis Richmond neighborhood, because that's where I live. And there are a lot of views both ways. There are a lot of people that would like it to remain as a Davis Richmond school. There are a lot of folks that say they'd rather be back at K-5. I have landed on F because I think that Plan B is, I've taken an oath as a fiduciary. That means I have to look at the finances and not waste the taxpayers' money. We have, for Plan B, there's really no plan. It's Plan B is an idea, and a great idea, to have dual language. I've been a proponent of dual language. For those who have looked back at what I've said over the last 12 years, if you look deep enough, you'll see that I was a proponent of dual language 12 years ago, and I was disappointed that it never materialized. I would have loved my children to have gone through dual language program, and they didn't get it. But I did spend those 12 years, 10 and a half of them now on the board. Never once that decision was made, I have never at this board table ever advocated for the dissolution of that partnership. When it came up in this scenario, I opted for that scenario because I felt that was not only what I had seen as a good thing, but the district administration had indicated that K-5 was one of their paramount ideas for good education. And so I did see that as a good solution. When I realized that K-5 could not be achieved with dual language, we started to think about different ideas. For me, when I look at a $25 million, almost $25 million bond being issued to essentially to balance our budget, and we're going to take 10 million of that and we want to take $10 million from that. Then that wasn't even really a consideration when we first started talking about that bond issue. Even if the 10 million fell from the sky, we have so many critical needs around this district that need that money. I think we need it elsewhere. I think it's fiscally irresponsible for me to vote for an option B. I think Plan F affords the opportunity to eliminate mobiles. That's what we said we wanted to do. Have K-5 across the district. That's what we wanted to do. Remove some of the transitions. That's what we said we wanted to do. Address crowding. That's what we said we wanted to do. Reduce transportation needs because there are fewer transportation needs when most of the kids in both Richmond and Anderson are the kids that Spanish speaking students are the ones that live in those two neighborhoods. So that would reduce the travel for both them, and it could reduce their amount of time on the bus, or reduce the number of those students that would need to go on a bus. It'd keep the highest number of kids in their own neighborhood. It would provide dual language, something that has bothered me, and I may be the board member that one of the folks was talking about. Something that's bothered me since we've had this program is our Hispanic kids have been essentially segregated from the other kids. When I looked at the class lists at my child's all-school sing, all of the Hispanic students were in a single classroom. I didn't think that was right. I don't think that's the way it should be. I don't want to have our children separated by anything. I want our kids to all be working and operating together. And that was something that occurred. It may have in the interim, it may have alleviated itself somewhat, but that's what happened at the time. I just don't think it's fiscally responsible to plan to spend somewhere near $10 million over the next couple of years for addition to a school to attend to a plan for which we really an idea for which we don't have a full plan yet. I am and remain a proponent of dual language. I want us to have a dual language program. I want us to have a dual language program that is robust. And I think the best way to do that, I think we need to go to Naperville and find out, how do you do that in single rooms, in a single classroom per building? They do it with 5, and they're able to do it, and they're able to do it well. And use that as a pilot program and produce a plan that gives us results. I'd like to see a real plan, a full plan, and results. And I would be happy to then say, should we house this in a single location? And it's that at that point, if that's necessary, I would be happy to have that discussion. But right now, we don't have a plan. What we have is an idea. It's a great idea, but it's a great idea with no plan. And I just don't see how I can, as a fiduciary, say we should spend $10 million on an idea. And I've even asked a couple of times now for what is the interest, because as we said, dual language is 50% of the kids English speaking, 50% of the kids non-English speaking in whatever language that might be, in this case, Spanish. And I still don't know what that number of the interest is from the English speaking students. And without that number, we wouldn't have, without that group of kids, we don't have dual language. We have what we have right now. What I don't want to see is for this plan to go into action, and in a couple of years, we either are flourishing or failing, and we have a problem with movement of kids. If we have this in 2 locations where the kids are mostly in their home neighborhood schools, then I think we're going to be in a situation where we can pivot more readily. And so what I don't want to see is for us to, in a couple of years, say, well, we can't really pivot, and it's going to cause a big problem as far as that domino effect of movement of kids. And since we can't do anything about it, we're going to do what we did with Richmond and Davis and just kind of kick the can down the road. I want to fix it. I want to fix it right. And if we ultimately come back to in a year or two after saying, we've done this and we've proven we can do this, then I want us to consider moving this to one location if necessary, or my ultimate hope is one location isn't enough. That's my ultimate hope. But right now, I just cannot see why we would spend this kind of money and commit this kind of money over the next couple of years for something that we've had 12 years to get right. So far, we have not even in the last 6 months produced a plan.
Sure, I'll offer a thought or two. The entire conversation started because of the insistence that overcrowding had a negative impact on some students. And it's a disproportionate negative impact on the students who are at the 6 schools that are today over capacity. And that results in negative impact on families. So to summarize, we have 6 schools, elementary schools over capacity, 2 that are at capacity, and 3 that are under capacity, inclusive of Fox Ridge. When we go back to some of the start of this project, which was the exploration of that capacity, there's a finding that admin brought back to the board in the April 10th discussion. It's on page 23. It talks about 3 specific actions around the fleet that need to be taken. One is the determination that the Lincoln building can never really house an efficient and modern elementary experience. The second is that Fox Ridge coming online as an elementary school is the only hope that we have as a district to solve the overcrowding problem. Both of those actions have a cost associated with them. And we've talked about those, and the board, I think to its credit, has sought to address each of those challenges through some significant spending and ask the community to bear the burden associated with that. There's a third finding that admin brought to the board in that April 10th deck on page 23 that suggests and reminds the board and the community that Richmond is too small of a building to operate effectively as a true K-5. In that deck, admin suggests 3 classrooms are required in order to bring it up to capacity. I'd remind everyone that as well, when you go back to the September 18th conversation that the board and admin had, there was a real discussion about transitions and how transitions negatively impact student outcomes. And there's a line in that deck on page 13 that talks about 2 years of learning loss, or the recovery of learning loss by the 2nd year of a transition. When we consider that we have a series of students housed today in Davis Richmond, in spite of all of the good work that the community and the teachers and the administrators have put into place since that split was made, to overcome that transition remains. It remains to be 2 buildings. This is why we have built systems of support around student experience in order to lessen or ameliorate some of that change. So when you think about all of those moves, bringing Fox Ridge online certainly has a cost, but it allows 600 students to have an experience that's in a fully functioning, not overcrowded school. When you think about taking Lincoln offline, that allows us to move 200 students and their teachers into a better facility. When you think about adding space to Richmond in a location and a neighborhood that the demographers have told us will consistently deliver students to D303, and that D303 will then always benefit from having those classrooms at Richmond, which has come up as far back as the 2019-2020 facility master plan. You can see that the potential to use Richmond not only as a fully functioning K-5, but also as the epicenter of an evolving from one-way to two-way dual language program at size and scale, shows a real alignment with not only the facility master plan, the recognition of efficient and effective use of space, but the equitable delivery of an elementary experience to all 5,000 of the students in the district. Then I can see that this option not only brings with it that, but it also brings with it the opportunity to focus on the Spanish-speaking community in a way that is different than as the district has in the past. If you look at the superintendent's goals this year, addressing some of the outcomes of the equity report, which was the opportunity for academic performance growth of the Latino population within D303. This particular investment has the added benefit of focusing some of that investment around a subgroup that has great opportunity for academic growth. For that reason, for the efficient use of space, for the alignment with the facilities plan that we've had in place, for the opportunity to ensure that all of the 800 students who will into perpetuity participate in a K-5 Davis and a K-5 Richmond, to have the positive vertical articulation that Mrs. McCabe mentioned and the K-5 Foundation, I look at the expenditure associated with option B as directly aligned to the strategic plan, directly aligned to the superintendent's goal of driving positive outcomes for a particular subgroup of students, as well as for saying that from an equitable experience for all 5,000 elementary students, we will finally solve the overcrowding issue for some great distance. Please recognize that all this does is establish not only a system that's consistent, but a planning framework for RSP to use as they allocate students, which is what the utilization and the boundaries discussion is about, to those facilities. We can then have a consistent view of K-5 and the opportunity to say, this is the way to deliver students to utilize each of these future schools, be that Richmond, Davis, or Fox Ridge. And so from my point of view, option B fulfills many of the board's charges and many of the elements of the strategic plan.
I would agree with what other board members have said about this is one of the harder decisions that we've had to make. And I think we're all working hard to make this decision. I want to speak for only how I view, which is the way I make all decisions at the board table for when things are in front of me, is I'm a student-focused board member. That is I'm not an educator, so that is my first lens, and then parents and staff. And all of those needs for me need to be made in a fiscally responsible way. So that's, if anyone is wondering how KPEL makes their decisions, that's it. I am not at all in favor of F. There's many reasons, some of which Mrs. McCabe stated. I don't have any interest in continually disrupting populations that particularly struggle with change. I am not an educator, and I'm going to take the information and recommendations that the administration gives us on that's not a population we should be willy-nilly moving year from year. And so I'm not comfortable with that. In addition, I feel that it's really important not to overpopulate one school when relieving pressure for a next. And so when we're looking at these, remember that we aren't even to the boundary conversation yet, but what we're doing is looking at these three options, A, B, and F. And for me, the ones that make the most sense, the one that makes the most sense to me on paper is B. However, when I'm hearing what the community is saying, what the educators are saying, what administration is saying, my preference would be A. I'm not saying all these things to garner any applause from the crowd. I'm telling you how I'm serious. I'm telling you how I feel, because that seems to be what we're doing tonight, is telling each other how we are going to make this decision. We can't always, I personally as a board member cannot always make a decision that is the most popular for the public. And I don't make that my number one factor. I look at what's best for kids, and I weigh that within the student and parent and staff needs, as well as what administration is saying, and then fiscally responsible. And for me, that seems to align best with A. However, I'm also comfortable with B in the sense that, to Mr. Lackner's point, when going back to what did the board lay out in April on what are our standards, we have to do something to meet the population needs that RSP has identified will continue to increase in that area. I'm also not comfortable with compromising our transient population, and I feel that A and B meets those needs best. I'm not comfortable with changing to F for those particular reasons. I think that I've covered everything. Thank you to everyone who's made comments tonight. I always appreciate the letters and comments that we always get, whether I agree or disagree. Just something as a board member that it's always really appealing to me to hear what the community has to say, because we can't guess. So I always appreciate when we hear from the community.
All right, I think it's my turn. So first of all, I want to say, share my gratitude for all the citizens and parents who commented to the board, sent us emails, called, a number of other things. So thank you very much for that. It's always great to hear from the community, especially engaging on this. As far as where my head's at for this vote, I appreciate everybody's comments, especially about how we've engaged in this process. This has been a long process. There have been a lot of meetings, including like one-on-ones with the district leadership, cabinet, et cetera, as we've talked through this. Mr. Lackner, you articulated kind of the main reason that I'm interested in the K-5 option, particularly the transition and what was done to the two neighborhood schools way back when. There have been a number of things that we've done as specific things to try to address that over the years. And I do not want to lose sight of some of the great work that's been done, at least bringing the bilingual education. The challenge that I have as a board member, and as we've gotten into things of the last little bit here, as we've looked at the financing, capital budgeting has always been a challenge for this district. We've been spending about $2 to $3 million annually on capital projects, when a district of our size, as we've heard many times, should be spending about 8 to 10. Our maintenance staff has made incredibly heroic efforts to keep our buildings up. Okay. We're running out of those things. Over the next 5+ years here, our district is looking at about $216 million plus of capital projects. So when I hear on option B that will take away from the increases in the budget that we're making for those capital projects to address this new construction, that concerns me. When we have every single one of our parking lots, all 2.6 million square feet of it, every single one except for 2 buildings is past end of life. People are losing cars and potholes at our schools. Okay. We have roofs that are leaking. This year, we needed to take every one of the mobiles in our district offline because of mold. We're also talking about now putting children back in. I do not want to see our children go back into mobiles, either for the safety and security measures that we've discussed many times at this table, or just because we're continuing to spend money on those things. I would potentially like to see a future thing that does get us the classrooms we need at Richmond. But with tonight, with that, I can't support B for those reasons. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other comments or discussion that board members would like to have at this time?
Just a couple. We've talked about disruption, and the one thing I want to point out too is that when we talk about reducing disruptions, it's not just disruptions currently, but disruptions in perpetuity. And having a plan that balances the district and avoids these things in perpetuity, and avoids these transitions in perpetuity. Is really, I think, paramount. I echo the sentiment, and I've brought it up a number of times regarding mobiles. That's something that I probably neglected to say, is that's part of the $10 million, is we would be putting kids in mobiles at Richmond for a period of time until such time as we did the construction in a couple of years. I am absolutely opposed to mobiles. They are they're a safety concern that has bothered me since I first saw them go up. And so I just really, for that reason, that's an additional concern I have regarding any plan that has mobiles.
I'd like to add one more thing, because I realized as I was giving my diatribe to the community, I didn't say exactly where I stood on a couple of these items. Some of it is repeat of to what my colleagues have said here, and specifically for option B, I can appreciate the following: standardization of a school size, alignment with K-5, highest populations of students to be served within that community. As I've been told, this wasn't a new idea, and it has been floated by the district previously, and adds long-term viability for the school. The challenges that I see, as others have stated, is a significant dollar amount being embedded into the creation or the addition of the brick and mortar facility. I also see the benefits of that as well, long-term benefits. I too share concerns about the implementation of a plan that we haven't quite fleshed out. With scenario F, much to the dismay of some of the folks in the audience, my thought process was that this was a compromise of sorts, with amongst a ton of scenarios that do not have perfect answers. They are all flawed. Scenario F checked the K-5, no mobiles, single building, dual language, overcrowding, no transitions, neighborhood schools, and adhered to the guidelines. I totally hear what folks say about the disruption to student groups, especially high need student groups, and that weighs heavily upon me. And if that were the scenario to move forward, then rest assured that we would absolutely ensure that that transition was as smooth as possible.
Any other commentary at this time? Okay, before we close out discussion, I would just like to reiterate from myself, very much appreciate the community involvement. I think it's very important to running ultimately a successful school district. We will not always agree collectively, but everybody's opinion, at least for me, is valued. And I think I speak for the whole board when I say that as well. I would like to also thank our administration and all of the effort that has been put forward. We have asked a lot of questions, a lot of tough questions, a lot of sending you back and back and back again. And so I'm sure that can be frustrating for you, but I appreciate it. I think it was necessary. I would also like to thank the principals and the teachers, specifically at Richmond and Davis. This is certainly by no means any type of evaluation on the job that you have done there, how well you have served the students, or anything of that nature. As my colleagues have said, we're really trying to look as best that we can at all of the facts and data as has been presented, and look at not only short-term but long-term considerations as well, and balancing a lot of constituents and views. So with that, I would like to move for action, and how we will do that, as I expressed quickly earlier, is we'll go through each action item as we have done business as usual in all of our other prior board meetings, and everybody will vote as they see appropriate. So for item A, which is scenario A, can I have a motion to approve the grade level configuration, scenario A, which is to maintain the current grade level configuration with Davis Richmond as grade level centers, and continue with the dual language program?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Is there a second? Mr. Kuchar, thank you for the second. Is there any additional or new discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
No.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
No.
Mr. Lackner,
No.
Mr. Lentz,
No.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
No. Final vote was 2 yes and 5 no. Moving to item B, which is grade level configuration, scenario B. Can I have a motion to approve the grade level configuration, scenario B, which which is to transition to all K-5 buildings with dual language housed at Richmond with the use of 6 mobile classrooms and a plan to build a 6 classroom addition at Richmond to make it a 27 classroom school.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell, for the first and Mr. Lentz for the second. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. McNally,
No.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
No.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
No.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes. Motion passes 4-3. We will, though, still move to item C on the agenda as well, which is grade level configuration of scenario F. Can I have a motion to approve the grade level configuration of scenario F, which is to transition to all K through 5 buildings with 1 section of dual language housed at Richmond and Anderson?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz, and thank you, Mr. McNally, for the second. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mrs. Bell,
No.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
No.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
No.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
No. Okay. Okay, so the final vote on that one was 3 yes and 4 no. Now we will, did you?
Yeah, just. You want to confirm.
So as confirmation, to make sure that everyone is very clear, although it will be in our meeting note documentation as well. Grade level configuration scenario B, that was the only 4 action item that passed with a plurality or majority vote of 4 yes and 3 no. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Gordon. So moving to item 9, which is the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, items 9A through 9T?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Thank you, Mr. Kuschert, for a second. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Next, we will move to item 10, which is also for action. And this directly relates to first, we have a tax levy determination resolution. So can I have a motion to approve the tentative tax levy for 2023 and adopt the truth in taxation law resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Lentz. Is there a second? Mr. Kuschert, thank you. Any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Now we will move to a series, items B through F, which are for action, and those specifically relate to the upcoming IASB resolution discussion and voting at the end of the month. The first one, it relates to industrial construction. Can I have a motion to approve the IASB resolution committee's recommendation to not adopt industrial construction?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell. Any discussion at this time?
Just to be clear, an affirmative vote is to vote not.
Correct. Correct. Thank you. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell. Yes. Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes. Motion passes 7-0. Item C is IASB Resolution 2, School Resource Officer Funding. Can I have a motion to approve the IASB Resolution Committee's recommendation to adopt school resource officer funding?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs.
Second.
McCabe. Thank you, Mr. Kuschert, for the second. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, please take the roll call vote.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell. Yes. Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item D is IASB Resolution 3, Bus Driver Regulations. Can I have a motion to approve the IASB Resolution Committee's recommendation to adopt bus driver regulations?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Marsan, please take the roll call vote.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell. Yes. Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item E, IASB Resolution 4, Employment History Review. Can I have a motion to approve the IASB Resolution Committee's recommendation to not adopt the Employment History Review?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Marsan, please take the roll call vote.
Mrs. Bell. Yes. Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item F, IASB Resolution 5, Alternative Safe School Funding. Can I have a motion to approve the IASB Resolution Committee's recommendation to not adopt alternative safe school funding?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe and Mr. Kuschert for the second. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell. Yes. Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 11 on the agenda is for information. So we have our four standing items for your information that were included in your packet. The District 303 Financial Report, Mid-Valley Financial Report, Freedom of Information or FOIA Act requests, and district enrollment. Item number 12 is new business. Do any board members have any new business that they would like to raise for consideration at this time? Okay. Now we will move to section 13 of the agenda, which is citizen comments. We do not have any citizen comments at this time. Can I have a motion to adjourn the November 13th, 2023 school board meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. Ms. Marsan, please take the roll call vote.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes. With that, the motion passes 7-0. The school board meeting is adjourned at 7:45 PM.